been thinking about this a lot because I was posting on TikTok when I was worried that I was gonna die from weight loss changes. I was so I had rashes and stuff, and so I just had so much on my mind, and now I'm more in order. One of the things I posted was when I was remembering my great grandma who died, and I accidentally said that she had immigrated in 1930 something, but it was actually in 1938. I accidentally said it because I couldn't remember her age, and I was remembering talking to her on the phone about it, so I couldn't use my eyes, and I adjusted her age in my head from remembering how she had changed her tone when we were talking, because she had been hesitant to tell me that she had immigrated from Warsaw. Because I was really young. That was a really great experience. I got to talk to her about it. So I was just remembering it all. And then when I adjusted her age, I got really nervous because I was thinking about it all, and I accidentally adjusted the year to where her either or age was. But then it was to put her age into the year. But it was 1938 or 39. It was in March, I think. That the date, because I wrote it out in calligraphy when I did the report. But it might be a different one, but I was thinking it was March 16th, 1938. And she got off the boat in New York. Or Maryland. Might have been Maryland, because I might have thought it was the same place, because we might have been doing U.S. history starting with around the time of the Mayflower, when we were doing family trees, because she wanted us to know that. And then I got the ahead about what we did next year or the year after. But parts of it I remember because of how I feel about it too, and surviving the dead, surviving history, and it's kind of a really touchy, sensitive position to have accidentally put out in that, but it definitely that's unstable. The history of Poland. Poland was a country that was not as advanced as Germany. Germany was advanced by historic development, and throughout the time, people had to leave castles. Some of the castles had gotten unsafe to live in, and people chose to leave to kind of preserve themselves and see what would happen to the castles. It was less attached than the people who had built it and lived in it. This happened to me last night. I was thinking about Germany, and cleaning my room. In Poland, there is a mix of people. Some of them had immigrated from all of the surrounding countries, and some of them were land frontiers. Some of them were looking for a different kind of less worrisome way to assess their way of life. So they were moving away from political parties, stuff like that. There was also sick people and injured people. There was a lot going on around Poland. But Poland is a really beautiful place, too. My great grandma really didn't want to leave Poland. She had been resistant to leaving. But one of the things that happened was her father, who was taking her to leave, told her that the Nazis were coming. And she thought about it on the boat. And it affected me in my childhood when we had moved away from her. And I think that she felt really worried about us being far away, but also like it wasn't really super real. I just wasn't old enough to have a different amount of power in the situation, so I didn't see her very much. But she had thought some things that I can put into perspective of like knowing what was going on with her when I was a child. One of the things was that the anti-Jewish propaganda was actually really scary. And in the history of World War II, one of the reasons there's an encyclopedia is to keep all of the different group movement in a processable kind of order, because it will also help us learn to get along and prevent the problems causing war. I have never been to Poland. I've never been to Warsaw. But it wasn't immigration from during or after the bombs. So I presume that my family had been in some kind of situation that is kind of difficult for me to guess at, but I think that I was also told that we hadn't been living in the ghetto. All of this definitely affected my nana, so I put in work to figure it all out for myself, or else I was going to be dealing with all these things. But when I was a child, I was also dealing with it in my day-to-day life because I lived in a rural property and I was out by myself a lot. And I just put together this year that it's probably the Jewish propaganda that was haunting me because I hadn't seen it. But sometimes I would be out, even in the middle of the day, I would be outside and I would have to sprint for the door of my house. I'd be walking like up a path. Maybe it was a path that my nana's route around her life had been similar to or something. Because I would get like struck with fear and like terrified that I was being gained on by a horrible flying monster that was going to get me faster the closer I got to the door. I normally felt safe when I got inside, but I have to like whip around and shut the door. And sometimes I'd have to run a really far away, and I was always scared to look behind me. It was really scary. I thought it was because I had like Hans Christian Andersen. Ha! I thought it was because of scary fairy tales, etc. Other fairy tales. I was trying to upload these videos about what happened in Germany from the fairy tales. So maybe I'll just say it again. So it goes straight about the castles. And there's one of the fairy tales that I read when I was really young. But that is definitely the experience of one of the drawings about the Jewish army when they had been not really an army, but definitely a force that was not deconstructed. Shaken out of force. There's other scary things in the fairy tales, and they're usually, well, like a lot of them are not fables. A lot of them aren't fables. They're actually, I have such a small amount of hair right now. They're actually like other types of stories, longly preserved stories, and some of those are alternate indications of what was going on from people. At some points in Germany, people wanted to have the castles back, and that was a source of tensions between some groups of people. One of the reasons that it had been unsafe to live in castles was because people didn't really know how to be safe living in them. One of the fairy stories, the fairy tales, is when they were daring people to go sleep inside of the castles. In the story, the man has to go past the three ladies and sleep there overnight. And I think he sleeps in a bed, and there's like three burdens instead of like there's the other three things in all the stories. So this one has like trials of the night in it instead, and it's like all sorts of things happening in this haunted castle. Oh, I had such a scary night last night. I thought that castle had been, all really came together. I thought that castle had been from when this woman was living in it and she had died in it. And when she was living in it, it was kind of like Sleeping Beauty. So everything, like if someone died in a home, sometimes if that person was a queen, then the castle would fall apart without the queen. And then like grave and things would get dirtier and stained, would be like damaged. There are three bodies in that story. There's like three ladies. They go around in the night and they walk through it. It's unclear why it's haunted. And if you didn't know me, I would be like a haunted person, but I totally have capacity to say all the things that I said about this castle. Really scary. I would be just like sitting. I wouldn't be a beautiful maiden. I see it's a bad idea. Like, don't go falling down the fall. Don't write it out that we might be beautiful maidens under the law. It's a different fable. It's kind of like the story was contained in what I had said. Wow. I wonder if it's a metaphor for something. Wish I knew what it was a metaphor for. It happened with so much certainty. I guess I was really unhappy about where I was living. Not in a house, but I kind of made it look more like student housing because rearranged. Basically, the castle was full of bodies because they had been scared that putting people into the ground was causing earthquakes. And that's why one of the ghosts was flying out of the armoire repeatedly because, yeah, I've never heard of a town so indicative of having a cleaned castle. But I also don't remember why he had to go into the haunted castle that no one would go into. And like sometimes like you could really die from how dirty the castle had been. It's not necessarily intuitive in the runes. I also haven't seen the runes. I've never been in the castle tour. I don't know. Like, still kind of looks like a tower. I might need some group assistance for judging it. It's really spooky. Yeah, this woman had found the woman who had died in the castle, and she just wrapped the body up in a sheet, and she was calling it Mother and living with it. And it was still definitely decomposing. And then everything was in bags because people, she had died too, and this boy found it, and he was like, that was a good idea. It was very respectful what she did. They're both very beautiful. And he made 2 of them. So they kind of died like Sleeping Beauty. And in the same book, there's a story with like pickaxes. But when I read it, the pickaxes kind of felt like they were in this story. Also, I thought that the Salt Girl was the very beautiful daughter of the bride, but that one's actually the one with the poisonous blue bottle and the mirror lover across the bird lake. And the yeah, the way they describe it, he has to get a certain amount into it, and there's dogs in it too. And it's all like very scary, very difficult to stay in, but it's just dogs and people. I mean, I was just like a 5-year-old and putting together why the thorns would come alive to punish that man, with why there would be so many songbirds in the cages. That was really traumatic. So it's possible it's just a drawing of Sleeping Beauty affecting the haunted castle story, which is possibly just ghosts. And people were trying to live in it downstairs. I mean, other things like how people would eat and have food down their mouth, that's pretty scary too. How is a part of it where inside of castles? What happened in Germany, and there are folklore stories about folklore ghost stories, fairy tales about what happened in Germany. And in the fairy tale, they tell you is that they were daring people to go. They were in a town building near the castles, and several towns they got, and it was near a town that would be calm. There's this woman who was living in a girl found with a rat, really dirty her, and trash. Some of the like corners had trash and stuff. There was different rooms in the castle still, and one of the dares was that you had to get past these three ladies that were sleeping in the guest room, and all died in the guest room. Kind of think that might have been all that I was talking about. It smelled like a castle still. The beauty was also making people die in a beautiful shape, so they didn't feel comfortable cleaning it out until everyone knew everything. They were mourning. People there were like one of the things that happened in this castle was the reason that they haven't been burying bodies was because of earth. Yeah, there was some earthquakes. That this ghost would. It was about the earthquakes, and so that's the room the man had to sleep in. And one of the things that had happened was a woman had gotten beaten down in place because the dead people needed a queen. Because the way they had died laying in place, the body, the wrapped up casket, the first body, had been hallucinated to have had the answer still because of something about the regalia acquired and what was happening about the rows. It had talked, and there was probably really poisonous dishes. Fear has something that actually happens in like minds in terms of the genetic historic landscape of psychological debate in America is totally crazy. So the fear is the crazy thing that I said. It's really sad for me because I was really sad about not speaking Polish, and it's something that definitely does embarrass me because I love Polish. I definitely understand some reading it. I think something every single time I read Polish, but I can't talk in Polish. That made it super difficult for me to learn French because I just didn't want to retain it as my second language when I still so recently left Polish and have so much trauma about like if it's okay to speak. It's still totally spoken. It's a really important language, but I'm not the one speaking it. And so my part of it has not been part of what's been going on with it. So I don't remember. So I just think about it and it's already cut off. And it's really sad. So like, I'm not gonna pretend that it's not different. Being blessed for it. This poem has some peak Polish comedy. Maybe I'll see if I can read it. It might be lip reading. This also has one of the most beautiful sentences of a loving compliment ever heard, but in another reading, it's also a stick up for money. So I don't know what's gonna happen now to me, for example, but this one is called Automia by Pamięci Halini Poświatowskiej. Sometimes I just repeat alternate possibilities of how the pronunciation is because I kind of get congested with something buzzy. I am really glad that I'm reading Polish and I'm the one reading Polish and I am left alone. So it's poetry. Niebezpieczeństwa dzieli się na drodze. Jedna siebie oddaje na can't noise, but I want to put it in as like an SEC. Światu druga zoba because some of them are going to be hard and over like that, and then some of them are going to be Polish darlings. If you read them all in a Polish darling, then it's not going to be a whole word. Sometimes people are hungrier and doing more business than you, so then they would read a different poem, and then you might get laughed at if there's a whole lot of business going on in the poem. Rozpada si gwałtownie na zuby, a ratunek na gryzny, a na kobietę, a widzi. Sexual, a little bit. But they're also explaining some of the differences in speaking the Polish language, because a lot of it's really similar to the English language, but the Polish people had gone about with some of these things that made them really sad. Some of them were bastards, were sad about the existence of bastardism. Maybe we'll budge. Wypłatały świata stresky rozwijała się przez pas. Odruchek natychmiast wykazał sobie bryzgasz. Na jednym bryzgu zmierzch, na drugim zjaś. Maybe like the end of me would be a wood. Some of them carry really big letters through a really cute phrase. This bastard ruins my life every day. I'm so harassed and disrespected and violated by the amount of bad energy and loudness constantly coming out of it. I'm so upset. Normally I have to listen to screaming sheep because I'm so a little broken down in my face bones, and it's like making me consume food at an alarming rate because I have to protect myself from the vulgarity. And then it just keeps making noise. I'm so disgusted. In a way, to vote for the magic language, but it's not okay. I don't want to know anymore. They haven't moved him yet. I don't want to. It's just like that's not what's decent to talk to people. I'm not in a field. Not at a potluck. I don't have a sword. I'm not ready to go. So, love Paul. There was a few, like, there's not mountain lions in Poland. Not really sure what that means. There were definitely mountain lions there. It's not like there's panthers. Panthers in Poland. There's not like koalas either. So it's relatively safe. It's just a mountain lion in the woods. Or a bear. Both of those things. Kind of like, you haven't seen a cobra. I have. Python. So it's relatively a safer walk in the woods. Well, I won't say anything more in here, especially if I'm not sure record. But I also wanted to talk about the language more. And it's really intentional. Basically, it's really intentionally a really pretty language. And it's meant to be auditorily attention grabbing. It's meant to do that to authenticate Poland, to prioritize speaking to people and not just doing Bible and text, like words. Bible, there's other books too. But it's kind of like a different mood if people are really processing the Bible. So for some people on the outskirts of language or who are working, some people were food providers that weren't farmers, and then that would be like cliff climbing sometimes. That makes it like a different space than processing the Bible. So that affected the Polish language and kind of made it into the identity of the language. And also the mix of people. So sometimes like people listening to Polish or speaking Polish will have like, there's a really musical orchestra of thoughts, in my opinion, from what's going on. And then so if I'm using my mouth, I'm occupying at least two major cranial nerves while I'm using my speaking nerves. And then also I'm using my my tongue movement nerves. I'm using with attention from, because it's not my native language, so I'm actually going into studying it as a full language where I'm not like feeling comfortable moving it around. I don't know the rules and grammar structure, so it's just an experience. So my nerves get taken up by being someone who's speaking it, and then also I have like all these layers of other things that I'm not entirely sure, but in all of them, I have like this orchestra reality of people gathering about noise. There's a speaker who's speaking a lot in a row and being really attention calling, then maybe they're working on building or people would get paid. Traveling to Polish workers sometimes return to Poland because of the hominess, and that contributed to it being a poorer country too. So all the characterisms of fondness go into it, and that's what I meant by a darling. When there's some parts of it are about what's being said. You might stress something fond in what's being said sometimes if you're talking to people intimately or romantically, or sometimes it's in the word and the language. Like this one's really cute as a word. So it's really important that we work on preserving the Polish language, and I think that it's really important that it not be lost. Sometimes it can be confusing though because there's a lot of like Z's kind of make a pause in the brain. So in the musicality and the influence of the Pied Piper, for example, maybe people didn't understand to piece out why it's not English. A lot of people speak in English too. And a lot of people are capable of learning two languages. There's usually Polish translations in the government buildings, and I really appreciate that. So it's kind of also like a cold language. It's always been a little bit strifeful. I didn't get to the really good joke, but I kind of like the mood. This poem has a really good Polish joke in it. It is inspired by Shakespeare, and the character in the poem is the speaker. I think that something like that's happening. Sometimes it's I think it's also kind of keeping everyone from doing anything raucous. Yeah, I was inspired by Polish, and it comes around. It's basically talking about behavior, and the Polish entity is sharing to be friends and also explaining that there's kind of a backpack lifting environment going on, and there's just like a really familiar comedic tone that sometimes has a rhythm in it. So when I'm reading it, I don't remember because I can't translate the words. But if I'm reading it all through and thinking, following one of the rhythms that I recognize, then I can get information like that. I'm going to end this